Hi, let's talk about order of operations today. And I am moving this. Let me grab this. Okay, order of operations. I know that many of you learned a phrase called PEMDAS, but I'm going to ask you to update that a little bit in 7th grade and call it GEMDAS. And the reason I start with a G is because rather than just thinking about parentheses, I want you to think about many different grouping symbols. So the first step is going to be to do what's inside the grouping symbols. But remember, besides parentheses, you might see these curly guys or brackets or even a fraction bar. That's a grouping symbol. Okay, and then we're going to do exponents next. That's the E. And then the multiply and divide from left to right. Remember, it just matters. You don't always do multiplication first. It just matters which one is first when you read the problem like a sentence. So multiply or divide from left to right. And then the last step that we do is to add or subtract from left to right. Okay, and then they write it down here for you as well. Okay, example 1, using order of operations. So we need to evaluate this expression. So the first thing I do is look, are there any grouping symbols? And there are not. Then I look, are there any exponents? And I don't see any. The next step is to look for any multiplying or dividing from left to right. So I underline the 4 times 20 and the 8 times 5. And so I'm going to simplify that. 4 times 20 gives me 80. Then I copy the addition sign. And 8 times 5 gives me 40. And then I copy the addition sign. And I bring down the 4.8. Now, I look for any adding or subtracting from left to right. So now I can just add them up from left to right. So 80 plus 40 gives me 120. And now 120 plus 4.8, just in case you don't remember about lining up those decimals, okay? 120 has a decimal right after the 0. And then I added that invisible 0 after the decimal. And then 4.8, and I added them up. So 8 plus 0 gives me 8. 0 plus 4 gives me 4. 2 I bring down, the 1 I bring down, and I bring that decimal point straight down. So I get 124.8. Okay, now evaluate these expressions. So the first thing I look for, are there any grouping symbols? Then I look, are there any exponents? Then I look for any multiplying or dividing from left to right, and I see the 6 times 3. So I'm going to do 6 times 3 is 18, then 25 minus 18 gives me 7. Okay, take a look at number 2. There are no grouping symbols. There are no exponents. Is there any multiplying or dividing? Yes, I see right there. 56 divided by 8 gives me 7. And then I just finish that up. 7 minus 4 gives me 3. Okay, let's look at example 2 using grouping symbols. So evaluate the expression. Remember, with GEMDAS, we always look for grouping symbols. And look at letter A. I see those parentheses. So we have to do what's inside the parentheses first. Well, in order to do 14 minus 3.8, you have to show your work, okay? So I have 14 point, and I added that 0, minus 3.8, and notice how I lined up the decimals. And so I subtracted and I got 10.2. You bring that decimal straight down. So I have now 5 times 10.2, and now I can just multiply that because there's nothing left to do inside the grouping symbols, and there are no exponents, so I go on to multiplying. So 5 times 10.2, well, I did that work over here, and that gave me 51. And so it's 51. Now you can put the 0.0 if you want to, but it won't change your value of your answer. It's just 51. Okay, look at example B. This is 27 minus 3 over 4 plus 2. Now this fraction bar is actually a grouping symbol, and they're showing you here. We have to do what's in the numerator, the top, first. Then we're going to do what's in the denominator second, and the last thing we're going to do is divide. Okay, so they rewrote it for you. But 27 minus 3 would give me 24. And then 4 plus 2 gives me 6. And then 24 divided by 6 gives me 4. Take a look at C. Now I want you to notice there are a lot of grouping symbols. See the brackets and the parentheses? Well, I always tell people, think about it like a target, like you're aiming a bow and arrow towards the center, okay? And so you always want to do the innermost parentheses first. So I see that 11 plus 8 is the innermost parentheses. That's what I'm going to do first. So 11 plus 8 gives me 19. But notice how I still have grouping symbols. So I still have to work with what's inside the grouping symbols. So 35 minus 19 would give me 16. And now it's just 4 times 16, and that would give me 64. Take a look at example 3, evaluating variable expressions. Well, remember, when they say evaluate, we just have to substitute the values in and then simplify. So I'm going to put the 3 in for the x and the 6 in for the y. And now I'm going to do the grouping symbols first. So 3 plus 6 gives me 9, and then 3 times 9 would give me 27. Okay, let's look at example B. We have 5 times the quantity y minus x squared. So we want to substitute the 6 in for the y and the 3 in for the x. Okay, and now remember with GEMDAS we have to do what's inside the parentheses or the grouping symbols first. So 6 minus 3 gives us 3. All right, now remember with the the exponents, we have to do the exponents next. So 3 to the second power would give us 9, and then we can multiply. 5 times 9 gives us 45. Okay, and then take a look at this checkpoint. It says evaluate the expression when x is 4 and y is 5. So the first thing we're going to do is plug in the 5 where we saw the y and the 4 where we saw the x, okay? So GEMDAS tells me to do what's inside the grouping symbols first, but I see two things. I see subtracting and I see the exponent. We have to do the exponent first before subtraction. So 4 to the second power would give us 16, and now 19 minus 16 gives us 3. And now we can multiply. 5 times 3 gives us 15. Okay, take a look at number 4. So we have 6y over x plus 1. Well, I like to substitute in the values first. So I have the 5 in for the y and the 4 in for the x. And now with a fraction, I just remind my students, do what's in the numerator first. So 6 times 5 gives you 30. And then do the denominator next. So 4 plus 1 gives you 5. And the last thing you do is divide. So 30 divided by 5 gives us 6.